Hi, I'm Franco Luna Puma Podcast. You're listening to Teka Teka News, balitang thinking, hindi breaking. In this episode,
Reports confirm that the oil spill has already reached the municipal shores of Pola, Pinamalayan, Gloria, and Bungabong. The spill appears to be flowing southwards towards the southern part of Oriental Mindoro.
an oil tanker carrying hundreds of thousands of liters of fuel sinks off Romblon in one of the worst oil spill disasters in the country's history.
Yan po, oil spill. Mula dun. Malawak. Oil spill. May gustot. Ano to? Kita nyo kumakilang ng dagat. Dito kami sa approaching Nawan. Nawan, Oriental Mindoro.
The MT Princess Empress, which was carrying some 800 liters of unrefined industrial oil and was on its way to Iloilo, was slammed by waves near Tablas Island off the coast of Nauhan, Oriental Mindoro. By the end of the day, the ship was fully submerged.
Our certified dive teams are now mobilizing to do the rapid assessment of coastal and marine habitats, such as the reefs, mangroves, and seagrasses that can be affected. The possible contamination might actually affect the viability of these systems.
That's Environment Secretary Antonia Loizaga. She was narrating aboard a boat as they ventured out to inspect the damage from the sinking of the tanker.
So yung nalalaman namin ng mga ulat from the ground na pinifeedback sa amin ng na-deploy namin na team doon, yung alam namin na immediate na impact at katulad halimbawa, meron na kami nababalitaan na 14 na fisher folk doon sa Pola ang nagkakasakit na.
And that's Virginia Benyosa Llorin, senior campaigner of Greenpeace Philippines Climate Justice and Liability Project.
Yung local communities pa rin patuloy silang nananawagan pa on more support, on more action.
As of press time, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources has warned of threats to 21 protected areas. At least 9 Mindoro towns have been affected so far, while new reports of spotted oil are also coming in from island barangays in Palawan, over 100 kilometers away. Some of the affected towns in Oriental Mindoro have already declared a state of calamity. Pola, for example, has imposed a curfew and a fishing ban. Residents reported using water pails and coconut husks to get rid of the oil that had reached their shores. The Oriental Mindoro provincial government has also urged residents not to drink water from deep wells and water pumps. We spoke to Dr. Irene Rodriguez. She's an associate professor at the University of the Philippines Marine Science Institute. She warns of long-term consequences the longer the oil stays on water.
In most of these ecosystems, yung prolonged exposure may lead to death of the corals, the mangroves, and the seagrasses. Pero yung immediate effect will be loss in livelihood sources, especially these are very important habitats and nursery grounds for our fish and marine organisms. Okay, so first and foremost, when you have the oil slick reaching fishing grounds, then automatically our fishing vessels will not be allowed to go in. At saka kahit makahuli pa ang mga fishermen natin ng isda, it will not be allowed. Yeah, it will not be allowed to be sold in the market. Even for them to go out on the sea, it will not be a good idea because harmful agad yung fumes.
Advocates are especially concerned about the possible damage to the already fragile Verde Island Passage, a strait linking Mindoro and Batangas, which has one of the most diverse ecosystems in the world. Here's why that matters.
The Philippines is a diverse, mega diverse environment. And the Verde Island Passage is widely known to be the center of the center. So yung number of organisms that you can see or you can interact with if you are, for example, diving in one of these areas or snorkeling malapit sa mga coast is even higher compared to other areas in the country. So it's a very important habitat, very important nursery grounds for all of these organisms. And then that feeds into the other water bodies connected to the Verde Island Passage. And also, that represents yung, kung ito yung kanilang spawning grounds, that represents the population of fish that will be available in other areas for eventually for catching and for feeding.
Before this, the worst oil spill in the country was back in 2006, when the empty Solar One, carrying 500 liters, sank in Guimaras. Again, the Princess Empress had 800,000 liters on board. So the Philippine Coast Guard and Environment Department are scrambling to do damage control now. But they're struggling to keep up.
The situation now in Princess Empress oil spill, the conditions in the area are quite rough. So the wind velocity is quite high, and also yung waves are very high also. So rough sea conditions are against us at this point. Kaya mabilis din yung spread ng oil slick. Right now, we have the vessels, but we need more. Let me just put it like that. Okay. Just like many other things in the country, unfortunately, we have specialists, we have people who are trained, but we lack in terms of infrastructure.
We're pausing for a quick break now. When we return, who owns the empty Princess Empress? In the long term, Irene says a full recovery from an oil spill can take anywhere from 3 to 5 years, sometimes decades, as in the case of the Exxon Valdez and Deepwater Horizon in the US.
And also, it will influence the food chain because the oil will remain in the surface of the water, and then that will inhibit the photosynthetic organisms from doing their work. And when we don't have the photosynthetic activity, that will impact the food chain because these are being the foundation of the food chain. Lahat yun, maapektuhan yung zooplankton density mo. Pag naapektuhan yung zooplankton density, it will affect the other organisms up the food chain. And eventually, it will influence the food sources for us as consumers.
In short, zooplankton can affect things like water quality, algae densities, and fish production. How far could the oil spill travel? Experts from the UP Marine Science Institute project it could affect 20,000 hectares of coral reefs, 9,900 hectares of mangroves, and 6,000 hectares of seagrass. That's across 21 municipalities in Oriental Mindoro, Occidental Mindoro, Palawan, and Antique. Not to mention the tens of thousands of families that rely on fishing for their livelihoods in these coastal towns. Given the magnitude of this latest accident, groups like Greenpeace are calling for a harder line against the country's fossil fuel industry. Here's Greenpeace campaigner Virginia Beniosa Llorin again.
Ang isang nakakalungkot na bahagi ng sitwasyon na 'to, na disaster na ito ng oil spill, yung mga malalaking kumpanya 'no, ng industriya. For example lang, yung Shell. In 2022, they made a record-breaking profit of almost $40 billion. Doble 'yon sa kinita nila the previous year, no? So, itong laki ng kinikita nila na 'to, may kakayahan sila na mag-invest sa renewable energy sources, but they're not doing it. Ang sinasabi natin, malaki man o maliit ang oil spill, it will surely leave a long-term damage to the environment, to the ecosystem, apart from the immediate impact that they give to the immediate community.
Republic Act 9483, or the Oil Pollution Compensation Act, holds ship owners liable for such damages. They're meant to pay for property and environmental damages, along with any proven fallout to human health. But Greenpeace says many in Guimaras still haven't been paid for that 2006 oil spill. Virginia says that ultimately the government should be looking to end the country's fossil fuel dependence and start holding coal and gas corporations accountable. But the road there is as murky as the waters off Oriental Mindoro.
Ang problem nga natin kasi parang there are still loopholes on how to make these corporations accountable. There are still many things that we have to fill in the gap in the system because this is a big industry. People knows climate change. People knows the impact. But what we don't understand is the intersectionality of the issues. When we talk about this, for example, the disaster that's happening now, yung oil spill, magkakadugtong yan.
According to Philippine Coast Guard spokesperson Rear Admiral Armando Balilo, the shipping company that owns MT Princess Empress, RDC Reeled Marine Services, has begun retrieval operations and is cooperating in the massive cleanup. But will any charges be filed against them? Here is Admiral Balilo.
Pagdating sa liability barko at ng may-ari would be determined after the investigation is done. Of course, ang palaging bottom line niya is kung merong negligence, kung merong kapabayaan. Depende kung anong ebidensya meron. Kung anong mababiolate nila. Criminal charges plus admin charges. Kasama yun sa, siyempre sa yung titignan sa investigation kung seaworthy yung barko. Pero ang presumption natin dahil meron itong clearance, meron itong certificate, seaworthy yung barko. Pero again, hindi tayo magsasara ng usapin sapagkat merong investigation na gagawin.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Franco Luna. This episode was edited by Pidoy Blanco. If you like this episode, share it with a friend or two. And of course, don't forget to follow Teka Teka News and Puma Podcast on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. Thanks for listening.